Yeah, I'm not getting sold on it right now. Be honest.
This one hungers.
What we're looking at. So let's start with the gameplay loop. So we're using Frost Wall, we're using Flame Wall, we're using Fireball, we're using Frost Bite, we're using Frost Bomb, and we're using Comet. But the main thing for clearing is, as you're just, you know, mapping, just throw a Frost Wall, shoot it. Frost Wall, shoot it. And you're shooting it with Fireball. Right? This is how you're doing your big clears. Because the fireballs are just going to ricochet all over the place. We're actually not hitting the good proc. Yeah, that's the good proc there. Where shit goes all over the place. Anyway. It looks a lot crazier when you're fighting a bunch of ads. There we go. So when you have to deal with rare enemies, you're going to put down a debuff. And then you can also put down the curse. So if a rare pack comes, you put down the Frost Bomb, the curse, then you throw the Frost Wall, and then you start shooting it. And then additionally, if you want to go Omega Chad, you put down the Frost Bomb, the curse, the wall, the Flame Wall, and then you have all the projectiles are passing through the Flame Wall as well and getting buffed. Another way to map is to throw down Frost Wall immediately by Flame Wall and then shoot it with Fireball. So you're buffing all the time. That is going to slow down how quickly you can get off your Fireball and crack your shields. But the Fireballs are doing most of the damage, and the shattering of the Flame Wall is doing a lot of damage as well. And then when enemies are frozen, you can cast a Comet. You can just hold it down and spam cast like that. All right, so let's talk about the supports on the skills. On Fireball, we just want as much projectiles as possible and cast as fast as possible. So we're doing Wild Charge, Scatter Shot. Ricochet is something new that I've been messing with. I'm not sure how efficacious it is, but it sounds good in theory, so we're rocking it. I could also run something like Unleash or Tempo to cast faster. And then Inspiration, I feel like, is a must. Oh, my bad. I always do this. Inspiration, I feel like, is a must because this just eats up mana real fast as soon as Wild Shard starts splitting. And if you're running Unleash, you definitely want Inspiration, but it's up to you. We fully max this out as well. Max quality gives it the chance to fire additional projectiles. I also don't know how this works with Wild Shards. It doesn't appear to throw additional projectiles with the initial cast. It almost seems like it might work when Wild Shards split, so I don't even know if this actually works, but you may as well upgrade it. Frost Wall, we upgraded this for increased cooldown recovery. That is super important because I think you must run Ingenuity on this, but since you have this upgraded, right? If you don't, you run Ingenuity so you can spam it. And that allows you to slot in Font of Mana. Every time you put a wall down, your mana regeneration goes way up. I think, it's 40%. So if I look at my mana here, right? My mana regen is 932 default. But when I put a Frost Wall down, now I'm almost 1,000. And you're always putting these down. So when you break them, that goes away. And then you put it down. So you just always have this up. And if you ever get into a defensive situation, you can just put these down on either side of you, and you have all this extra mana recovery, which is life. I'll explain why in a little bit. So we're also putting Glaciation because I use Frost Walls to freeze heavily. Icicle so that I can break them more easily. And Spell Cascade so that that's what's throwing like the multiple layers here. That layer here and layer here, that's Spell Cascade. Otherwise, it would just throw one little sliver there in the middle. We're using Flame Wall to buff all the projectiles. You can clearly see the difference when I'm firing this, right? And then when I put a Flame Wall down, you can see how much crazier. There's like additional fire projectiles with... Yeah, there's a lot more going on. We're running Fortress to create the circle. And then we're running Arcane Tempo so that we can just throw these down on the spot whenever we want. So I recommend mapping them to an easy key. Frostbomb is basically our debuffer. It's applying cold exposure, so it's reducing the enemy's resistance to cold. And we're using Unleash. Or I'm sorry, I was gonna say, why am I using Unleash? We're using Strip Away, so that the it has a bigger, or it has an increased effect of exposure. Then we're also using Magnified Effect, so it has a bigger circle. And then we're using Persistence so that it lasts longer. Now you might say, why would you do that? Wouldn't you want to run the thing that makes it disappear faster? Well, I'm using it as a sort of territorial lockdown debuffer. So I want this to be up as long as possible. I'm not using it for damage. So the way that I see it is the longer that this is here, the more an enemy can run over it instead of putting it down and having it pop almost immediately. Yes, it does tick slower, but I think you get the point. For Comet, this is strictly just used as a self-cast, like twice when an enemy freezes. You have enough time to do 2 or 3 of them. Unleash, so you cast 3 of them. Spell Echo, so you cast another extra one. And then Inevitable Critical, because you're not using it a lot, you're giving it a chance to build up its crit chance up to 100%. And then Hypothermia is our Curse, which is lowering the cold resistance of the enemy. So you just throw I pretty much only use this for like bosses. Frostbomb is really good for mobbing too. Absolutely necessary, no questions asked in my opinion. Archmage is extra damage, meaning you don't even have to run you do not have to run a lightning build for Archmage to be insane. If you want to see why, if I go up here and I look at my DPS on Fireball, we're just looking at stat numbers right now. I don't care how correct they are or not, but just to prove a point, 12,380. If I take off Archmage,
for raiding with 37 viewers.
Look at this, 3,762. So you can see the DP, and it's very noticeable. You can see my total damage, right? You can see the cold damage here is 1,700 to 2,500, and the lightning damage is 4,000 to 6,000. And the reason being is because Archmage, every 100 mana gives you, what is it? I think mine is up to 8% damage. And the reason this is 8% is because I have upgraded it. I've upgraded its quality, and I made it a level 18 gem plus a level 1 from the gear, which I'll explain where all that's coming from. So every 100 mana, I get 8% extra damage as lightning, and that adds up very, very quickly. Grim Feast, I've messed around with so many different, like 30 spirit, 60 spirit, like I tried so many different things, and ultimately Grim Feast I feel like is just the best option for Sorc, no matter what Sorc you're playing, because it overflows your ES, your energy shield. And this whole build is based around, like, you know, keeping your energy shield up as high as possible. That's a lot of your survivability. I'll explain how all this works shortly, but every time you kill an enemy, there's a 50% chance. So essentially half of the enemies that you're killing, because that's how math works, gives you a chunk of energy shield. And as you upgrade Grim Feast or add quality to it, it increases the amount of energy shield that it adds, and it overflows it to double. So I could get 7,000 energy shield plus with this particular setup. So I think Grim Feast is nuts. And the way that you run Grim Feast and Archmage is you need 140 spirit. So you need a chest piece that has at least 40 spirit, or you can run an amulet if you're not running Everlasting Gaze Azure. As for the gear, definitely recommend a wand and a focus, right? And the things that are absolutely crucial are plus level to spells. Now, before, you could still run plus, I think it's 4 level to all spells. And I think those only drop with wands that are item level 81 or higher. So you really got to run juiced maps to even get a chance to drop these, or just look to buy them. It is going to be really expensive. So this is, you know, thanks to Chevy for this one. Chevy actually got this dropped and traded me it. So, Before I was running a +4, so he juiced me up to a +5. But I think +5 to all fire spells is actually just better overall, because Fireball does become your main source of mapping DPS and a lot of heavy boss DPS as well. So I think +5 to fire spells is best. Plus to all spells is second best. And plus to cold, you don't want it all, because that won't buff your Fireball. Even though you're converting Fireball to cold damage, it's still a fire spell. You're still casting a fire spell whose fire damage is being converted to cold after you cast it. What else you want on here is spell damage, cold damage. You absolutely need mana. On it, pretty much everything needs mana. And then another really nice thing this has is cast speed. This build is all about as many projectiles and as many of them getting out as quickly as possible. So cast speed is another best in slot option here. On the focus, very similar, right? Except we're stacking energy shield on the focus, but cold damage, this one could also use cold damage, spell damage. You want a high mana roll, and then this one's going to roll +2 level of all spells, and that is an absolutely necessary perk or mod to have on this, because this buffs not only Fireball but also buffs Frostwall. So you can see Frostwall here is getting +2, Fireball is getting +7 because of the fire spells here. And then cast speed as well, and mana regeneration would be best in slot for both the wand and the focus. Unfortunately, I don't have it on the wand. I think it rolls on the wand, but mana regeneration is huge. That's how you get, like, you want ideally around 750 800 mana regen per second while moving with this build. The helmet, you want as high energy shield as you can possibly get, and you want a mana roll, maximum mana roll on this, plus an int roll on this is going to be best in slot, and then whatever resistances you need. On the chest, you're going to want as much energy shield as possible. This one, I was able to find one. This was the last piece of gear that I pulled that has over 550 energy shield. On this, you need the +40 spirit. If you don't have it, you're going to drop Grim Feast and just run Archmage. And then you also want the intelligence roll on this, and then whatever resistance you need. These are the gloves that you're using. You just need a pair of these. These are actually really cheap. I think I got mine like 4 days ago on it was like one Exile or something. And then on the boots, movement speed is king. If they don't have movement speed, don't even use them. You want as much energy shield as possible. You definitely want that 100 plus mana roll, plus you want an int roll on this, and then whatever resistance you need. I like to only run one resistance on the boot, so I can run int and reduced freeze duration. I think reduced freeze duration is best in slot, because that's going to kill you a lot. On the belt, whatever resistance you need plus a mana roll and a charm slot is really nice as well. On the rings, whatever resistance you need, mana regeneration and maximum mana are best in slot. You definitely want to get maximum mana. That's super important. Mana regeneration is almost equally as important. And then if you can get cast speed on these as well. I got cast speed on one of them, right? Yeah, this one. And then this is the most expensive part of the whole build. So this doesn't make or break the build. This definitely just takes it to the next level. So what this allows you to do, if I take this off, right? You can see my energy shield. If I take this off, I lose all my energy shield. But this converts after Eldritch Battery in the skill tree, which I'll explain. When you put this on, it gives you all the energy shield, which is equal to 30% of your max mana. So if you didn't run this, I personally would not run Eldritch Battery. I would not convert my energy shield to mana, so you would take a little bit of a DPS, but you would actually be way tankier, so it's not necessarily a bad thing to not have this. But if you want to be full glass cannon, highest DPS build possible, you will need this. As for the sockets, whatever resistances you need, 2% max mana is really nice there. If I could, I would just probably run the 2% max mana, or I would run the 20% increased energy shield is another really, really good one. Okay. here we are, the tree. I'm just gonna snake up the tree here and explain what I'm using. So I'm currently doing my final trial. I literally need one more token to open the final door. But I can tell you right now that I'm gonna take elemental damage and scouring winds for the better exposure with Frostbomb. I did test this out and I did not like Elemental Storm. I think it's weak. I think it could be okay with a crit and cooldown build, maybe, but it just seems kind of like, I don't know, it just seems kind of clowny. I don't know. It doesn't seem that strong. I wish they would track. I wish they would like follow after and chase the enemies. It just kind of stays in one spot. Heart of the Storm is also, it's hard for me to tell how good it is when you're using Grim Feast, but at this point it's like, what are your other options? You're not really chilling because you're either freezing or nuking everything, in my opinion. So you may as well just take this, and you may as well just take this and just let the rest chill. And then this is absolutely necessary. Arcane Surge is super powerful. Mana regen, cast speed. Cast speed is your friend in this build. All right, we're going up the left side here. We're taking spell damage, and int. We're grabbing the full cast speed. We're grabbing this for energy shield. We're coming down here, grabbing the 25 mana regen. We're grabbing these for mana and energy shield. We're grabbing this for energy shield recharge rate. You want your energy shield to come back as quickly as possible. Mine pretty much comes back in like a second or less. There's 3 big nodes you want. You want rapid recharge, you want dependable ward, and you want convalescence. So those are the juicers. We're grabbing 3 or 4 strength so that you have enough strength to run the gloves. You could have like a strength roll on one of your pieces of gear, in which case you would just turn these into int. We're coming over here. These are big damage nodes, 12%, 12%, 12%, 24 against enemies afflicted by ailments. So frozen enemies, chilled enemies. Snaking up here, we're grabbing heavy buffer, which is a 40% increase to energy shield plus 2 15s. Because originally we had this node, but we ended up dropping patient barrier because the slower start of energy shield recharge is a big negative. So we picked this one up instead. Additionally, instead of grabbing these 3 nodes for stun threshold up here, we dropped all 3 of those to free up a slot and grab the stun threshold here with Hallowed. We're coming up here, shooting down here for the jewel socket, and coming over here, grabbing all these for energy shield and mana. We're coming out here. We're grabbing this for the elemental resistance plus the 30% elemental damage. You could swap these up. These are not necessary nodes. You could put these somewhere else if you wanted to. This is absolutely necessary. Adverse growth. Because as you take damage, you're getting 20% of it back with mana, and mana is your life. You basically want this mana recharge rate to be as high as possible. Or grabbing mind over... Actually, I'll go over those later. We're coming up here. We're grabbing Arcane, which is another huge one. This is increasing our Arcane Surge, which is our cast speed and our mana regeneration by 40%. So vital. Coming over here, grabbing a jewel socket. Coming straight through here to the middle, grabbing a jewel socket. We're grabbing this for a plus to elemental resistance and then more energy shield. So you can see we're just stacking energy shield mana, energy shield mana, energy shield mana. That's pretty much all that we're doing. Then we're coming up here. These are our only nodes on the tree that are giving us penetration. Because I don't think you need to overkill pen too much. This also gives us cold exposure, so this is kind of a W here. We're coming up here. Freeze buildup is super important in this build. You basically want to freeze on touch. And then you come over here, 40% freeze buildup and duration. Inescapable cold is a must-have for this build. Coming over here, grabbing this 25 int, which is huge because int equals mana, mana equals damage, mana equals life. Then we're snaking over here. We drop 2 of these nodes to free up because these are low. And we're grabbing this for 50% mana regen while moving. And then we're grabbing this for increased mana, increased mana, and increased mana cost, but it doesn't matter. We're really there for the maximum mana. And then this is huge. 3% increased spell damage per maximum mana, per 100 mana. So not only is 100 mana giving us 8% damage with Archmage, but it's also giving us 3% spell damage, which is just going to keep stacking. My mana is almost at 4,000. We're coming over here, grabbing this for the energy shield recharge rate, grabbing this last socket here, coming up here. This is all cast speed, mana regen, and int. Okay. and then snaking down here. This node is now fixed, or at least the wording is. So we get more freeze buildup on both of these. And before, this one would just ignore enemy resistance when they were frozen. But the problem was, if the enemy resistance was negative, it would ignore that negative, because I think it's what? Exposure takes enemy resistance into negative. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it would ignore that. But now, if their resistance is negative, you'll hit for that extra negative resistance damage. But if it's positive, then you're ignoring any sort of positive resistance that they have, and you're just doing full damage on them. And then this is huge. This is 50% damage against frozen targets, which is going to be great for rare enemies and bosses. The big nodes that we're using. Oh yeah, we came over here for ES. I'm not sure if I said that. The what are these called? The big, I was just calling them the big boys. I forget what they're called. We're using mind over matter. So what we're doing there is all of our damage is being taken from mana instead of life. And the caveat is we take a huge hit with mana recuv, but that's why I said mana recovery regenerate is super important. So whenever we take damage, instead of taking it from our health, we take it from mana, and we're stacking mana. And also, since health doesn't matter anymore, we can use chaos inoculation, so we can bypass any chaos damage or poison damage. So that is no longer an issue. That's what takes our health to 1. So these pair perfectly. And if you have the amulet, the everlasting amulet right here, you can take Eldritch Battery, which converts all of your shield into mana, right? Now, the way that that conversion works is anything on the tree that is percent energy shield does not carry over into this conversion, but where it does carry over is it carries over with the amulet. So if you have the amulet, you still want to run as much energy shield as possible in the tree, because that's going to add and stack over to this. So only percent modifiers to mana are going to increase this number, not percent modifiers to energy shield. And that's how all conversions work in this game anyway. Like with these gloves, you're converting fire to cold. So only percent modifiers to cold damage matter. Anything that's fire damage is not going to matter. Now this is the outlier, because this is fire spells and not damage. And since you're still casting a fire spell, it still takes advantage of this plus the fire spells. Okay, so that's a mouthful. But that's pretty much the whole build. This thing cruises. I mean, we were literally just running through level 16, like tier 16 boss maps, and we were clearing them. So it does a really good job of literally the hardest content in the game right now. I haven't taken on any pinnacle boss or anything. I haven't found anything, brand new. But yeah, that is pretty much how the build works. As far as charms, I guess I could mention this too. I run the rare and unique, but I think if you don't have the double slot, the frozen one is absolutely the best one. Nothing kills you more than being frozen. That's why I run reduced freeze duration on the boots and frozen charm. All right, I think that's just about sums it up. I call this build just the firework build, because it literally just looks like a bunch of fireworks. And it's really pretty. I would say the biggest downside, I think boss damage has been cleaned up a lot. The biggest downside is just sometimes it can be hard to see boss attacks if you're not familiar with them. But for bossing, once again, keep your debuffs on the boss, and you just throw an ice wall and break the ice wall, and then debuff, throw an ice wall, break the ice wall, throw an ice wall, break the ice wall, and just keep the debuffs and the flame wall and the ice wall on the boss at all time, and just keep shattering and shattering, and their health will chunk. That is it.